Andreas Voskuhler, the most powerful man in Germany, he's on the right here and heads up the country's constitutional court, which this week votes on Germany's participation in the Eurozone Rescue Fund, the latest major event in the Eurozone crisis. For his take on this and where the Eurozone is post-ECB, I'm joined by Chris Scicluna, Head of Economic Research at Daiwa Capital Markets. Chris, the court is almost certain to approve Germany's participation in the ESM, but you think there are still big risks out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly expect it to approve the ESM, but it's certainly no done deal. Of course, the judges are looking at this matter from a constitutional perspective, a legal perspective, not from the perspective of financial markets or what makes sense for economic policy. And, you know, we certainly don't rule out the possibility that the decision will be postponed again for further consideration, although that isn't our central expectation. You know, our central expectation is that the ESM will be given the green light, but with certain conditions attached which will constrain its activity going forward.
What might those conditions be, very briefly?
Well, I think there's a couple out there. One is that I think the German Parliament might well be given the final say on actions that the ESM might undertake, and therefore that will leave a degree of political risk out there. I mean, it might also be that the Constitutional Court decides that the ESM won't be allowed to lend directly to banks, thus bypassing governments, and then therefore the proposed solution for Spain, that in due course the lending, the debt associated with its bank bailout might shift back to the ESM and to the banks away from the government balance sheet, that proposal might well be stillborn.
OK, you mentioned Spain there, and I want to ask you about conditionality for any loan, official loan that Spain might request. I'm still unclear. Will there be extra conditions, extra strings attached to any request for aid from, say, Spain, or not?
Well, we're fairly confident that there will be additional conditions attached, and there'll be the kind of conditions that we see in the programmes for Ireland, Portugal and Greece, you know, covering matters such as fiscal policy, fiscal reforms, also labour market reforms. There's no doubt that the ECB has a long wish list, and for reasons of moral hazard, you know, providing the right incentives there, and also because it wants to make sure that its interventions are a success and don't damage the ECB's home balance sheet. They're going to certainly want to push through those conditions onto Spain.
But this is crucial because instantly, at a stroke, any extra strings attached increases implementation risk, especially when Rajoy in Spain and Monti in Italy have indicated they won't accept any extra conditionality.
Well, of course, they would say that they won't accept any extra conditionality, but unfortunately, take Rajoy's case, the economic deterioration, the financial deterioration, which is ongoing in Spain, means that Rajoy simply won't have a choice pretty soon. He'll just have to accept the programmes that are being offered and negotiate some conditionality which is acceptable to the creditors and particularly to the ECB. Remember, the ECB is most dissatisfied from the experience of its first securities markets programme when it started to buy Italian debt, set out the kind of policy reforms that it expected the Berlusconi government to implement, and then of course Berlusconi simply ignored that, so they don't want to be bitten again. OK,
I want to ask you about Greece. I asked EU Commissioner Olli Rehn at the weekend if Greece would have to restructure its debt if the country was ever to become solvent again. He didn't answer directly. What's your view?
Well, I think ultimately the Greek fiscal position is still unsustainable. The Greek debt stock is not going to decline towards 120% GDP level that the creditor countries hope will be sustainable in future. But I mean, that's not even sustainable anyway for a country like Greece, in our view. Ultimately, Greece is not going to be able to deliver the kind of measures requested. It has to adopt and implement pretty much as much austerity that it's already been through, and we've already seen the wreckage that's left on the Greek economy. So in our view, you know, Greece is heading for an exit from the euro area. It's not going to get the debt relief that it's after, but it's not going to be able to implement the austerity measures required to stay in there either. So, you know, I think in due course Greece is going to be on the way out, and probably sooner rather than later.
Oh, OK, just to finish up, and there seems to be a contradiction in what you're saying here. You think on the one hand the disaster scenario for Europe has been averted by what Draghi outlaid last week, yet you still think Greece might leave the euro within a matter of weeks. That would suggest that there is a disaster on the horizon.
Well, I think what matters is that the resources are put in place in Spain and Italy, and the firepower of the ECB and the ESM is put to good use, to good effect, to manage the contagion that's likely to rise from any Greek exit. If those programs are put in place and the ECB is ready to start buying Spanish debt, for example, Portuguese debt as well, etc., then I think that now the markets would be able to cope with that and the contagion would be manageable.
OK, Chris, thank you very much. My thanks there to Daiwa Capital Markets' Chris Scicluna. That's all from us for now, but stay with Reuters for full coverage and analysis of all the week's big events. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.